Boyfriend's best friend became an eternal guest in our home during a pandemic, destroying our newlywed privacy, and I feel trapped. My boyfriend, 28, and I have made our home together in a little 2-bedroom place, tucked into a quiet suburb outside a city here in the US. We've lived together for about 2 years now. We met at work, nearly 4.5 years ago, and have been a couple for close to 4. Last summer, we were supposed to get married, but COVID hit, and we had to cancel our plans. Both of our parents have health concerns, and there's just no way I could celebrate without them there, so we've been holding out waiting for the vaccine to become more widespread for the big day. It'll happen eventually. We both want the whole wedding experience. Now, my boyfriend has this friend, I'll call him Bill, 28. He and my boyfriend go way back, childhood friends, practically inseparable for years. Bill's family had its problems when he was growing up, so my boyfriend and his parents were like his second family. My boyfriend went off to college, but Bill didn't, yet they stayed close since everyone stayed in the same area. As long as I've known my boyfriend, Bill's been right there as his best friend, and over time, I've grown to really like Bill, too. He's the life of every hangout, always up for a laugh, genuinely kind. I would even call him a friend now, even if he and my boyfriend obviously share the tighter bond. Before the pandemic, we used to go out on double dates when Bill had a new girlfriend, a frequent occurrence, since his relationships never seemed to stick. My boyfriend once told me Bill's quick to end relationships are probably a holdover from his rough childhood, but I'm no psychologist, so I just took his word for it. Last May, Bill's life took a nosedive when he lost his job and couldn't pay his rent. He was single at the time, with no family around to help, so my boyfriend asked me if Bill could crash with us for a while. Of course I said yes. I thought it was just a temporary thing until he landed back on his feet. But here's the kicker: since May, Bill's been living with us nonstop. I really like Bill as a person and he's a considerate guest, but, bluntly, I'm tired of it. In August, he did land a new job. I don't know the specifics, but it pays close to what he made before, and he's chipped in with bills and groceries, yet he hasn't taken any steps toward finding his own place. Our house is cozy, which means my boyfriend and I have no privacy. It's always just me, him, and Bill. Because of COVID, we're all working from home, and all but living on top of one another. Our area's caseload is high, and everything fun or date-worthy is closed anyway, so it's not like my boyfriend and I can escape for a dinner out. My couple time has vanished into thin air. Around New Year's, I couldn't keep bottling it up, so I talked to my boyfriend about Bill moving out while Bill was out of earshot. My boyfriend wasn't angry, but he explained he couldn't just push Bill out when he's still in need, that it would be too lonely for Bill to live on his own in the middle of a pandemic. Then he brought up how Bill was there for him during the darkest time of his life, when my boyfriend's brother died in an accident as teens. Apparently Bill's support back then meant everything, and my boyfriend says he owes it to Bill now to do whatever for him since he's like family. My boyfriend also pointed out that my sister third once stayed with us for a month when she needed to escape an abusive relationship, and that he never complained. After that conversation, I've honestly felt caught in a mental tug of war. Are my feelings justified, or am I being selfish for wanting Bill to move out now? I zoom from feeling guilty and irrational, to feeling 100% certain that I can't take this lack of space and couple time anymore. Am I too harsh, or is this totally reasonable? I just don't know. But instantly, my boyfriend became visibly upset and accused me of telling Bill I wanted him out, which wasn't even true. He said I'd probably make Bill feel bad and insisted I didn't know Bill well enough to judge how he felt. Then he told me, for the very first time, that Bill has depression and anxiety and that staying with us was helping him cope. I hadn't known any of this before, which, sure, is possible, but it felt like a sudden excuse. At that point, I was getting pretty upset. I told my boyfriend that while I was sorry if Bill had these issues, it wasn't really our responsibility and that Bill was interfering in our home and our relationship. The argument escalated, and I was on the verge of tears. That's when Bill came out of his bedroom. Our house is one story, so you can't hear everything. He must have overheard us fighting. He said he would leave if he was causing that much stress. My boyfriend tried to stop him, but Bill grabbed his keys and left in his car, though all his stuff was still there. After he left, my boyfriend and I exchanged a few frustrated words before I told him I couldn't keep fighting when we were both emotional and tired. I decided to spend the night at my sister's place, just 15 minutes away. I packed my laptop for work and a change of clothes and drove over to her apartment where she and her daughter live. The next day, I worked remotely from my sister's place. Neither my boyfriend nor Bill called me, and I didn't call them either. After my shift ended at 3, I headed back to the house, hoping to catch my boyfriend and talk things out. But when I got there, the place was empty. Both my boyfriend and Bill were gone, which was odd, since they both work from home and never leave before 5. All of their stuff was still at the house, so I knew Bill hadn't moved out for good. I tried calling both of them, no answer. I fed our cat and just sat there waiting, feeling completely lost and uncertain about what to do next. All day, my boyfriend's mother kept calling me, which made me uneasy. I didn't answer partly because I was working, but also because I really didn't want her involved. She and I aren't close. We exchange pleasantries at holidays and family gatherings, and sometimes when she calls to talk to my boyfriend, but that's it. She doesn't really approve of us living together before marriage. She's very religious and she's clashed with my boyfriend about us not attending church regularly. That simmered down with COVID, but still. She never calls me directly, so I figured the calls were probably about the situation with Bill. I couldn't see why she'd be involved, especially given my boyfriend's lukewarm relationship with her. I found myself wondering if maybe my boyfriend and Bill had gone to her place. Honestly, I didn't know what to think. My sister told me I should break up with my boyfriend, that the whole thing was a giant red flag. But we've built a life together, we've even been planning our wedding, and if it weren't for COVID, we'd already be married. I do love him. But at that moment, I just felt so unimportant and pushed aside. On Valentine's Day weekend of all times, he's gone and I have no clue where. How could Bill possibly be more important to him than me? I just couldn't make sense of it anymore. Eventually, my boyfriend did get back to me, and we talked briefly. He said he needed to blow off steam and that's why he'd gone away. He promised he'd be back on Monday and we'd talk since we both have President's Day off. He apologized for missing Valentine's Day. I tried to stay calm. I didn't want to cause another scene. Initially, he told me he was alone, but later, when I mentioned his mother said Bill was with him, he admitted Bill was actually there. That left me feeling even more uneasy, but I tried to push it down. I asked if Bill was okay, and he reassured me that he was fine, which I was relieved to hear after all that had happened. Update 2. My now ex-boyfriend came back around noon with Bill. Bill gave me a quick apology for everything that had happened, then disappeared into his room. My boyfriend, well, I was still calling him that just to avoid confusion, sat down with me in the living room, just the two of us. I took a deep breath and started. I apologized for overreacting last Thursday, but I had to be honest. The fact that he ran away and lied to me broke my trust. I told him that I thought we should break up. He agreed. He apologized for everything, missing Valentine's Day, running off for the whole weekend, the whole situation with Bill. His voice was raw, choked with tears, and I could tell he meant it. Both of us were crying. I had to know why he'd reacted the way he did, why he'd pulled away and lied. It turns out, those of you who guessed he was involved with Bill were right. According to him, he and Bill had fooled around when they were kids, his words, not mine, but stopped when his brother died at 17. He swore they weren't involved after that, just that they'd stayed close friends. Things started to change only after Bill moved back in with us, and, as he insisted, that wasn't the reason Bill moved in the first place. He claimed they didn't have sex while living together, though this weekend they crossed a line. I didn't know whether to believe him. After all, our place was tiny and I was usually around, so maybe they hadn't been hooking up before, but now I doubt it. He told me that when I confronted Bill about moving out, Bill turned around and pushed him to make a decision. That's when he just lost it, and frankly, it showed. He'd been confused, scared, and let that panic come out as anger and avoidance, taking it out on me. He kept insisting he wasn't gay or bisexual, that he was straight and had genuinely loved me. The whole thing was heartbreaking. Tears kept coming, but in the end, I told him I'd move out and let them keep the place. It sounded like Bill was staying, too. Now I'm staying at my sister's with my kitty, searching for an apartment. I'm doing okay. It still hurts and I feel pretty terrible, but I realize now I'm lucky this all came out before he ever became my husband. Update 3. First, the logistics. I signed a lease on a small one-bedroom not far from my sister's place. Old building, creaky floors, lots of light in the afternoon and exactly enough space for me and my cat. Move-in is at the end of the month. I met with our landlord to get my name off the current lease and, surprisingly, that was the calmest part. Bill offered to take my spot. The landlord ran his numbers and said it was fine as long as my ex stayed. It meant I could step out cleanly and get my half of the deposit back as soon as they transferred everything over. My ex had already moved half the money from our joint wedding savings to my account with a short note, "I'm sorry," and nothing else. No fight, no haggling. Just a clean wire. On Thursday, I went back to the house to pack my clothes and dishes and whatever else was actually mine. My sister came with me because I didn't want to be there alone. Bill answered the door. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept, and he was wearing the same hoodie I've seen him in 100 times, like he'd gotten stuck in the week and couldn't quite step out of it. He didn't try to make small talk, just asked what he could carry. My ex was in the back room on a call, work bled through the walls, and for an hour we did this quiet, careful ballet around each other. Every time we crossed, Bill gave me this little nod I can't really explain. Not sorry so much as steady. Present. The ring was in a cereal bowl on the counter, his grandmother's. I'd kept it in its box these last days, but I didn't feel right tossing it in a moving bin with my mugs, so I left it there next to the bananas and a bottle of vitamins, like it was just another thing to be put back in its right place. Somewhere between the second box of books and my winter coats, I found the old photo strip from an arcade date we did when we were 24 tucked behind the microwave. The top picture is me trying to kiss him while he pretends to run away, the bottom one is both of us blurred because we were laughing. I didn't know what to do with it, so I put it in the small pile of things I wasn't making a decision about yet. When my ex finally came out, he looked like a different person, smaller somehow, if that makes sense. He asked if he could help with the TV. I told him I'd already sold it to a coworker, and he hesitated, like he wasn't sure if that was a joke, and then nodded. He said he'd started seeing a therapist on Monday. Health. He didn't say for what, just that he needed it and he should have done it years ago. I told him I hoped it helped. He asked how the cat was. I said she'd found the one sunny patch on my sister's couch and declared it sovereign territory. After my sister carried a bin to the car, Bill asked if we could talk outside for a minute. We sat on the steps. He kept his hands tucked under his legs like he was freezing even though it wasn't that cold. I need you to know I'm sorry, he said. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. I told him I hurt him. He stared out at the street like it could give him a better script. We didn't run off to have some. I don't know. We went to his mom's because he had a full-on panic attack. He called her in the middle of the night like he used to when we were kids. I know that probably sounds ridiculous, but he couldn't breathe. He swallowed. She picked us up. She saw us holding hands and lost it, and then she was calling you. He told her not to. She did anyway. I clicked the missing puzzle piece into place about her back-to-back calls. I asked him if she was the one who told him to come back on Monday. He laughed, but not in a funny way. She told him to repent and propose. He actually did the air quotes. He told her it wasn't about you. Which is true and also not the point. I answered her call later that afternoon while I was sitting in my car outside a U-Haul place, mostly because I was tired of letting it ring and not because I wanted anything from her. She sounded tired, too, like she'd been crying into a towel. She asked if I had the ring and if I'd please leave it with my ex, and then she asked me, very quietly, if I would forgive him this confusion. I don't think she meant to be cruel. She wanted to rewind the whole world back to last summer where she could picture me in a dress and her son in a tux and Bill as the best man pretending nothing inside him had ever curled around the idea of another man. I told her I didn't hate him and I would not be marrying him. She said she understood, and for a second I believed her, and then she said, I hope you'll still come to Easter, and I had to hang up because my throat closed up. I made a telehealth appointment with my doctor on Friday and went for a full panel. I'd been late and my body had felt like a stranger, empty and too loud all at once. Negative across the board, pregnancy test included. I cried in my car in the pharmacy parking lot next to a man loading 40 pounds of birdseed into his trunk. I didn't know I was holding that much air in until I let it out. At work, I told my manager I needed off our shared projects. He didn't ask for details, and I was grateful for that. HR sent an email the next day with new assignments and a line about respecting boundaries. I moved my desk into the corner of our guest room at my sister's and set my mug beside the laptop like it was some kind of anchor. I built a routine that took up space in my day so the empty didn't get to pick the furniture. Here's the part I didn't expect, Bill is moving out, too. He told me on Sunday when he came by my sister's place to drop off a small box of things I'd forgotten: a cardigan, the photo strip, some mail that had gotten wedged under a plant. He stood in the hallway like he wasn't sure he was allowed to cross the threshold and said his sister in Arizona has a spare room and a dog that sneezes when she's excited, and he bought a one-way ticket for next week. He said it as if he was still convincing himself. I asked him if my ex was going with him. He said no. He said my ex needed to stop choosing who to be based on the rooms he's in. I love him, he said, not performative, just simple and bold like a fact laid on the table between us, but I won't be the reason he keeps lying to himself and everyone else. He rubbed his thumb along the edge of the box like he could sand it down. I thought he'd choose you, he added, soft. When you talked to me about apartments I figured that was my cue to get on a waitlist and let you two get married and show up at the reception with someone new in a tie that didn't match. I wasn't brave, either. I don't know why, but that undid me more than anything else. Maybe because it made the last year feel less like I'd been living in a parody of my own life and more like a tangle of people who didn't know how to do right by themselves, let alone each other. On Monday night, my ex dropped a manila envelope at my sister's with my name on it. Inside was the printout from the venue confirming our cancellation and the vendor refunds with the ones we could still get circled. He'd written notes in the margins with billing contacts and what he'd already called. He signed where I needed to sign. Between the lines, there was a post-it in his handwriting from years ago, "Don't forget milk," that had stuck to the wrong sheet and stowed away through a dozen moves. It made me laugh out loud, which felt like a small act of rebellion against the heaviness of everything. I slept through the night for the first time in a week. The cat pressed herself into the curb behind my knees like a comma. I went back one last time today to grab the potted fiddle leaf fate I've kept alive against all odds and the embarrassingly large bin of kitchen spices I've hoarded like treasure. The house felt hollow without my books, like the walls had stepped back to give me space to leave. My ex walked me to the door. He didn't try to make any more promises. He put his hands in his pockets and said, "I'm sorry I made our home feel like it didn't have you in it." I told him we did that together. He asked me if I wanted him to mail me anything that straggled in. I said yes, the electric bill and any packages, and also, if he found it, the movie ticket stub from our first date. He smiled. "You kept that?" I drove to my new place after signing the last of the lease documents. The super gave me a set of keys with an orange tag, and when I opened the door, the room smelled like fresh paint and dust. I put the photo strip on the windowsill and the cat in the middle of the empty floor and watched her decide where to put herself. Bill texted me a photo of the desert sky from a screensaver his sister sent him and a thumbs up emoji that looked ridiculous coming from him. My ex texted later just that he'd told his dad and it had gone better than he expected. I didn't ask what better meant. Update 4. The first night in the new place, the radiator knocked like someone politely asking to be let in. The cat tried to make herself as large as possible in the living room, tail bottle brushed, then decided the safest place was the bathtub and curled around the drain. I slept on a borrowed air mattress with my head by the window because the streetlight put a quiet gold square on the floor, and the fig leaned slightly toward it like a person eavesdropping. At 2 in the morning, a smoke alarm went off somewhere down the hall and the whole building spilled onto the stoop in pajamas and socks. It wasn't a fire, just a grilled cheese left too long on a pan, but for 10 minutes, the sidewalk became a tiny neighborhood, a woman with curlers wrapped in a robe the color of a traffic cone, a guy in a faded college hoodie holding an enormous gray cat named Mr. President, the super in his bare feet with a screwdriver, and me clutching my keys and the cat's carrier like talismans. A little girl in dinosaur pajamas pointed at my carrier and asked if my cat liked belly rubs. "Absolutely not," I said solemnly, and her dad laughed hard enough that it fogged the frigid air between us. The next morning, a florist van double parked outside and a man in a puffer jacket started unloading boxes onto my front steps. He asked for me by name. I told him he had the wrong person. He read off my address. I signed because I didn't know what else to do, and then there were 12 waist-high cardboard coffins in my hallway, each full of white roses packed like sleeping birds. The slip said Center Akisa's Arrangement B. The room filled with that specific green, wet smell that happens when you walk into a cold greenhouse. The cat sneezed, offended. I called the number on the slip while I peeled back tissue paper and the girl on the line apologized 3 times and then told me the driver couldn't take product back once it left the truck. A past version of me was on a spreadsheet with this company circled and little notes about deposit windows and delivery dates and refunds. This version of me pulled out a pair of kitchen scissors and the mismatched jars I've been hoarding since 2018 and started cutting stems on an angle like YouTube instructed me months ago. When I ran out of jars, I used drinking glasses, then old jam containers, then one of those giant saucepans my sister swears you need for feeding people properly. I knocked on the orange cone robe woman's door. She opened, took one look at me and the armload of roses and said, "Oh honey," with a tenderness that almost knocked me over. I left bouquets on the 3rd floor landing with a note free, "Take one." I set a few in the entryway by the row of mailboxes and the super rolled his eyes at me and then asked if he could have too because his wife has been stuck on double shifts at the hospital. A teenager with a skateboard tucked 2 stems into the elastic band of his beanie and said, "My girlfriend is going to think I'm dramatic," and then grinned. My phone buzzed against my hip while my hands were covered in leaves. It was my ex, the stub, found behind the thermostat cover, in an envelope with 2 stamps and a stick figure he must have doodled without thinking of me as the recipient. One to that, another text, "The florists?" I circled them, I swear. "I'm sorry. I hadn't texted him anything about flowers." I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. I sent back a picture of the hallway, a riot of white and glass and greenery next to the scratched molding and wrote, "They are being repurposed." 15 seconds later, "Good. Bill sent me a crooked photo around noon, desert sky so blue it hurt, and the brown line of a cinder block wall with a dog's nose pressed to a crack in it. She sneezed and scares herself every time, his text said. A second later, I got sunburned walking from the porch to the mailbox. I forgot the sun here is a different animal. He followed it with a screenshot of a Zoom window with 8 squares and first names and LGBTQ centers men's group, he said. He didn't ask me to reply. I did anyway. Proud of you, I wrote, and meant it down to my bones. In the afternoon, I propped the ticket stub on the fridge with one of the ugly save the date magnets we never sent, one that listed a date that now felt like an alt-universe doorway, and looked at it until the tightness in my chest receded. It's a cheap bit of paper from a movie we've only chose because the showtime fit between a work meeting and a closing bar kitchen, and I don't know why I kept it all this time, but seeing those numbers anchored under a smudged still from a mediocre action film somehow proved that a thing I remember existed the way memory claims it does. The magnet is uselessly cheerful. The cat tapped at the corner until it moved just slightly, then sat and watched it like it might leap. My ex's dad asked me to meet him. He got my number from his son, which could have annoyed me, but he started his message with only "if this isn't too much," and that counted for something. We picked the park halfway between our old place and my new, where the basketball courts are always occupied by a kid who can't miss and someone's cousin in a work shirt pretending he's not winged it. He was 15 minutes early and sitting on the cold bench with takeout coffee, hands wrapped around both cups. He stood when I came up like we were at church. He looks like his son around the eyes and nothing like him around the mouth. He apologized first, not for the situation, because he kept saying it wasn't mine to carry, but for any times they had made me feel outnumbered or used. He said he'd told his son he loved him and that none of that was a contingency plan. I don't know what I'm doing, he said, staring at his shoes like they had an answer printed on them, but I wish we'd all learned sooner that nothing good comes from trying to live around one person's truth. He told me something about the ring I didn't know. His mother proposed to his fatherman at 1949, on a porch swing with splinters, and bought her own ring in a pawn shop because the salesman called her little lady and she wanted to hand him cash from her factory job and never see him again. He said the ring is not precious metal, it's plated and the plating wears off if you look at it too hard. But she loved that ring like it had been pulled out of the ocean, he said, almost smiling. She'd make a spectacle out of polishing it with a dishcloth like she was at Tiffany's. He said he and his wife have been fighting about church and about what language to use and what stories count, and he doesn't know how to stop her from trying to fold the world back to a smaller version of itself. He asked me if I hated them. I told him I didn't. He breathed like he'd been waiting to exhale since Tuesday. Before we stood to go, he reached into his coat and handed me a Ziploc with a handful of loose Polaroids, me and my ex and Bill on a pier somewhere, my hair whipping into my mouth, Bill making the face where he refuses to smile and ends up grinning with his eyes. "You were in our house on holidays," he said. "I thought these should be in your house, too, if you want them." I put them in my bag, thinking of my mother's admonition to say yes when people offer you things out of their hands because it makes them feel useful. After he left, I watched 2 kids practice layups until the tips of my fingers went numb inside my gloves. That night, the building's group chat, someone had shoved a QR code on a post-it by the mailboxes, with neighbors. "Let's be one," written in ballpoint pen, came alive with flower photos. The woman in curlers had rearranged hers with baby's breath from the bodega and tied them with a shoelace like a bow. Mr. President sat in a crown of petals like a Renaissance painting of a tyrant. Someone on the second floor lined their windowsill with bud vases so the building looked briefly like a storefront. I made pasta with my sister's ridiculous saucepan and ate standing up at the counter in a kind of late morning silence you only get at night when the city finally remembers to sleep. On Sunday, my ex's mother rang my buzzer. I saw her on the camera, coat buttoned wrong, hair sprayed into submission, eyes already glossy. I didn't want to let her in. I let her in. She didn't take off her gloves when she sat. She didn't ask about the cat until she'd apologized for calling me with that weird Easter sentence, as if Easter could be a tarp thrown over a whole broken car. Her apology was the kind that sits sideways in your throat, real enough to hear, not easy to swallow. She brought a Tupperware of lemon bars and a printout from some church newsletter with a schedule for a counseling group that made my stomach drop. She said she hadn't given it to her son and she wouldn't, that she just wanted me to see what finds its way into your hands when you are scared and your fear prays more loudly than your love. She said she's trying to lower her voice. She asked if he and Bill were together. I told her no. She covered her mouth with her hand and her eyes did something I didn't expect. They softened into something like grief, but not for the thing she thought she'd lost. She asked me what she should do. I told her I wasn't the right person to teach her how to be his mother. She nodded so hard I worried her hair would come loose and laughed a short, wet laugh at herself. Before she left, She put her hand on the edge of the counter and said, "I was wrong about living together before marriage," like it was a bead she needed to slide along a string to get to the others. I was wrong about a lot of the words I picked. After she went downstairs, I stood at the sink and ate one of the lemon bars with my fingers. It tasted like something someone had made on purpose in a kitchen they knew. On Monday morning, a small envelope in neat, blocky capital letters arrived in my mailbox addressed to occupant unit 3. Inside were 6 more of those useless magnets from our almost wedding with a sticky note. "These got returned to sender with your name on them. Figured they were yours." I put one on my fridge and used it to hold up my utility bill in the stub. I tucked another into the hand of the little dinosaur pajama girl when I saw her in the stairwell. "For your drawings," I told her, and she said very seriously, "Okay, but I won't draw any dinosaurs that are sad." When I got back upstairs, my cat had claimed the empty florist box and was sleeping, paws over her face, in the hollow where other flowers had been. The apartment smelled faintly of lemons and cut stems. The radiator knocked twice, question marks I didn't need to answer right away. I made coffee. I wrote a check to the electric company and spelled my name in the memo line like I was still practicing it for the first time. New place, new handwriting. The fate turned another quarter inch toward the light all on its own. Update 5. On Wednesday, a bakery van idled outside my building like a ship that had taken a wrong turn and decided to dock anyway. The driver buzzed and read my name off a clipboard like he was trying on his tongue for the first time. "Delivery for the 9th, he said. I said it wasn't the 9th and also not my wedding. He shrugged and said the kitchen had already boxed everything, that once cream hits the road there's no insurance to bring it back. He lugged up 3 half sheets that smiled up at me through their plastic windows: lemon with raspberry, chocolate with salted caramel, something the label called champagne vanilla because someone in marketing knows exactly what to do with wishful thinking, and a pint container of extra buttercream with a piece of tape over it that said "in case." The hallway smelled like sugar and the engine heat the cakes had slept in. The cat stood up in her florist box and made a small low noise that I have only heard when shrimp is involved. I texted the building chat, "Emergency cake redistribution in 3. 10 minutes later my door was a revolving door. The woman from down the hall with the traffic cone robe arrived with a knife she announced had carved 3 Thanksgiving turkeys and 1 very ambitious ham. Mr. President's human knocked with a stack of paper plates held to his chest like a henmill. The teenager with the skateboard tucked himself into my doorway and tried to look unimpressed, failed, and said, respectfully, "Is that pink frosting?" Someone had fairy lights left over from December and draped them around the spice bin on my counter so the sugar looked like it was lit from within. We stuck one of the leftover useless magnets onto the fridge to hold up a post-it that became a menu purely because a pencil was handy. We cut triangles from corners and pretended we were judges with clipboards. The forward clink against the paper plate sounded like cheap bells. The chocolate was so good people made that involuntary sound you only hear when something is exactly what it says it will be. The lemon had an edge that made the back of my jaw twinge, and then everything went soft. The champagne vanilla tasted like someone had tried to teach elegance to a sponge cake and succeeded just enough to make it charming. The orange cone robe woman put her hand on my shoulder after her first bite and closed her eyes for a second like she was saying a small thank you. The cat took her opportunity while everyone was busy pretending there was a right way to hold a fork on a paper plate and printed her whiskers in buttercream. A little smear of pink sat between her eyes and everyone laughed like that, too quietly, relief disguised as amusement. At some point in the sugar, my butter went. I saw her on the screen before the name registered: my ex's mother, in a coat button wrong again, holding a Tupperware under her elbow like a football. I let her in because I'm apparently the kind of person who doesn't know how to do anything but open doors when hands are full. She stepped into my apartment and stopped as if she had walked into a greenhouse of frosted peonies. Someone said, "Cake? The way people say peace?" and held out a plate like a tree. She blinked around the room at the teenager, at Mr. President draped over a radiator cover like a fur rug, at the little girl who announced matter-of-factly that the pink kind tasted like ballerinas and then took the plate. She ate quietly at my counter while the building made a party out of bad planning. When she was done, she put both hands around her paper cup like it needed steadying. "I brought your container back," she said, and slid the lemon bar Tupperware toward my sink like a tiny boat that had finished a big journey. She didn't bring the newsletter. Instead, she pulled a folded paper from her pocket with an address written across the top in an all-caps hand that matched the magnet's envelope from the mail-room. "There's a meeting tonight," she said, not looking at me. "For parents. I don't know how to find the door without someone next to me." The room moved in slow motion around us for a second, someone laughing in the hallway, fairy lights catching in the sink water, my cat making small chirps at a crumb that had dared to stay out of reach. We went. The building emptied out like a tide as we put lids on cake and wrapped plates in plastic like leftovers count as a future. We walked the 3 blocks to the church with the slope steps and the signboard out front that usually advertises rummage sales and car washes and now just said, "Masks on, lights on, we're here." The basement smelled like coffee that had been taught how to be faithful and a hint of floor cleaner. Folding chairs intimidated no one. A man with a button on his cardigan that said he/him in block letters handed my ex's mother a pen and a name sticker like a sacrament. We sat in the back near a bulletin board full of clippings and hand-lettered affirmations that made my teeth ache and my eyes warm at the same time. A woman with a braid down to the middle of her back introduced herself as someone's aunt and started by saying what she had said wrong to her nephew 3 years ago and how she had fixed it with more words and less fear. A dad with 4 arms like he hauls lumber for a living said the sentence "my daughter's girlfriend" and then cleared his throat because the thickness in it was joy and he wasn't used to where to put it. A grandfather with trembling hands passed around a photo of his grandson with the kind of smile that takes up a whole face. My ex's mother made one small sound on her inhale and then folded the corner of her name sticker into a tiny flag with her thumb. When it was her turn, this is what she said: "I am not here to be brave," and then, after a beat, "I am here to be taught." The woman with the braid nodded like that answer was a door she had been waiting to open for her all night. When we walked home, the air felt like the inside of a freezer someone had left cracked so it could think about thawing. On our corner, the teenager with a skateboard was teaching the dinosaur pajama girl to ollie with unbelievable seriousness, his board braced in a snowbank to make a little ramp. The woman with the robe waved from her window with a piece of cake in one hand and a fork in the other. My ex's mother stopped at my steps and said, "I sent him the address," like she was handing me a very small bird she hoped would learn how to make its own nest. I nodded and did not say anything about birds. When she hugged me, it was the hug people give each other when you have been strangers in identical rooms and suddenly those rooms share a wall. In the morning there was a padded envelope under my door, my name printed in the all caps that made me think of someone who has learned things by writing them large enough to see at a distance. Inside, a picture from his brother's funeral I had never seen before: 2 boys standing shoulder to shoulder in suits too stiff for their bodies, one of them my ex with his hand cupped protectively at his own elbow the way he does when he's trying to look fine. Under it, a note folded 3 times until the paper went soft at the creases: "I told my mother. I told my manager. I told myself out loud." It felt like saying my own name for the first time properly. "Thank you for opening the door. P.S. There's buttercream on your cat's nose in the photo you posted to the building chat. I haven't laughed like that in months." I hadn't posted any photo to him. Someone must have, or the building had developed a mysterious cake gossip telegraph. I wiped a dry paint kiss off my cat with a damp finger and she gave me a look like I had ruined the best part of her evening. Bill left me a voice memo that afternoon instead of a text, his voice tinny and too close like he was talking from inside a tin can strung across states. "The dog sneezed on me so hard I have to wash my shirt again," he said. "There's a mountain outside my sister's window that looks like it sat down and decided to be a mountain and won't be talked out of it." I went to the center. They have terrible coffee and I drank 2 cups and told a room of men my real life and didn't actually fall apart. I forgot to put sunscreen on the inside of my ears and now they are mad at me. I have an interview at a bookstore that smells like sun-baked dust jackets. Also, I bought a hat. That's the update. I stood in my kitchen with my hand flat on the laminate and smiled at a voice I could not see. That night, the super knocked with a flight of to-go containers and said his wife had sent them back with him because we should not be savages eating cake with our hands on the landing, and then stayed to show me how to drain the radiator without yelling at it. He pointed at the valve like he was telling a secret to a very small audience. The radiator knocked twice and then let out the breath it had been holding. The fate turned itself so decisively toward the window that I swore I heard it. I went to the thrift store on Saturday because my couch, when it arrived, would need something to keep it company until I knew what pictures should be on the walls. I found a frame that had once held a diploma and will now hold a cheap movie ticket and a magnet with a date from a version of me I can't hold in my hands and still like. On the way back, I passed the church again. On the signboard outside, someone had changed the letters while I was gone. It read, "Love doesn't need your perfect timing. It needs your hands." The cat has decided the bathtub is no longer Saharan territory and has instead colonized the strip of sun that moves across the floor from 11 to 1 like a slow train. I am getting used to the way this building answers back, a thud above when skateboards land well, a laugh that finds its way through vents and is none of my business and still makes me glad. There are 3 more pieces of cake wrapped in my fridge and I am saving one on purpose for a day when I forget I put something away for myself. The magnet holds the stub and the bell and the brand new, spelled right letter with my name on it that says this is where you send the gas money to keep the heat talking. Somewhere in Arizona a dog sneezes and a man answers one question, he doesn't have to shout. Somewhere on the other side of town, a man practices saying his own name into a bathroom mirror until he is not practicing. The radiator knocks once, like a polite guest. I do not rush to the door. I have time. I cut a sliver of cake with the edge of a butter knife and sit on the floor in my socks because there's no good furniture yet and because being grounded feels better this way. I'm not waiting for the knock to become a command. I'm learning the sound of it as punctuation I get to choose.